Hello, and welcome to Political Society, the sequel. My name is Maxwell, and I will be the host of today's episode, where we talk about ranked choice voting, a new system of voting that allows voters to rank the candidates in an ordered list rather than choose a single one. Proponents of the system say that it better represents voters' opinions and helps to prevent strategic voting, while opponents say that it is too complicated a system that would further complicate our election process. In recent news, Massachusetts failed to pass a referendum where ranked choice voting would be the new system in a narrow margin in the recent 2020 election. I'm joined by two guests, Connor Thompson and Henry Richardson, both of whom are very well educated and opinionated on the subject, so I'm very optimistic about having a lively and educational debate today. My first question goes to Henry. What are your general opinions on the topic?
Thank you, Ethan. I believe ranked choice voting, while it's a good system in theory, has a few flaws. Like you said in the intro, it is a bit too complicated of a system. There are potentially 10 candidates who need to be on the vote, and you need to rank every one of them. So you need to do searches on information for every one of them. That adds complexity, especially if you're not connected to something. Another problem is sometimes you can't abstain from voting for someone, especially in the main system they have that, which if you don't like a person and do not want to vote for them absolutely, then you can't abstain and choose to not vote for them, which is very much a problem.
Well, one of the clarifications in the Massachusetts ballot, and that's kind of the one that we're discussing today, is that you could just choose a single candidate, rank them one, and then everyone else you don't even rank on the list. But if you so choose, you can rank 1, 2, 3, 4, all the candidates. The number of you don't have to rank every single candidate. You can only vote for as many as you want. So there is that option to specifically target your point about forcing to vote. That wasn't in the Massachusetts plan. Connor, what are your thoughts?
I think that having to abstain shouldn't really be a deal breaker in this system, because if you think about it, if you really don't want a candidate to get your vote, you can put them at the bottom of the ranked choice voting list, and then they would have to go through 9 other candidates in order to get your vote, which isn't going to happen, especially with the currently very divided political parties. You're never going to get to that 10th candidate, which would have like 0.001% of the vote.
Well, like we can actually just put this to a model election. Like let's take, say national or take the national populations of, okay, probably like 48% Republican, 48% Democrat, roughly, right? And then you have the rest of the 2% being Libertarian or Green Party. A lot of one big gain from the ranked choice that a lot of people support is that it'll help people be less afraid to vote for a third party that they might agree with more, but they don't vote for initially because they know that the third party has no chance. So I think that what you could see in the system is, say, a Democrat that really likes the Green Party but knows it'll never win, they'll do number 1, Green Party, number 2, Democrats, so that way Green Party gets 10% of the vote. Still loses, but it shows how much support there really is. Henry, you mentioned the complications in the system, so just want to, with current technologies, do you think that, technology and our, 21st century outlook on things could help now that we have the ability to facilitate this ranked choice voting?
I certainly think it could help, Ethan. However, I still believe, especially if there are multiple candidates, like I mentioned in the beginning, 10, that would very much complicate things, and you'd have to do a lot of research. That's a lot of time. A lot of people don't have time to research certain topics like that.
Well, to be fair, the current election system expects you, at least in the ideal case, that you should research all the candidates in the beginning in the first place. So ranked choice voting doesn't diminish or decrease the number of candidates. It only gives certain candidates a better shot.
That's what I'm saying. You now have to do research on those candidates. You can't just write them off as someone who's never going to win. For the presidential, let's say, you only had to do research on the Democratic and the Republican candidate. Those are the 2 candidates who are 99% likely to win. You didn't have to do research on the Libertarian Party or the Green Party. However, now with ranked choice voting, you need to start doing research on those parties. You need to see if you're interested. And that's going to be a lot of time that people are sucked in. It may bring new information to the table, and it may bring a less corrupt government, which let's say we can all say is good. However, it's going to add a lot of time and research that people need to now add into their lives, and that not everyone has. As well, they're still not likely to win. It's going to show they have more support, and that may decrease the frontrunners by 5 or 10%, but it's still just going to be the top 2% who win. I believe they did it in California. There were 4 or so counties. None of the winners of those 4 counties won with a majority vote, which is what ranked choice voting promises.
So, in the case of saying that it requires more time and effort to research the candidates, would you really say it's a downside that people are now going to be more educated on the candidates for each of the different parties, and that they now have to actually put more thought into which candidates they're supporting? As well as maybe they didn't win with majority vote, but they still won with the largest vote pool out of the candidates there, which would mean that they are the most supported candidate and therefore the best pick.
I'm not saying that more educated voters would be a bad thing. I'm just saying not everyone has the chance to become more educated.
Well, I think
that's going to be a lot of time and effort put into it that not everyone has. I'm not saying I'm against people who are more educated. I'm just saying people aren't going to become more educated because they have time restrictions or something like that. Ranked choice voting isn't going to change that.
I think Henry's point kind of targets at a core problem with current democracy in America, where voters are less attentive. You know, the percentage of the population that votes, that is eligible, is and is politically involved, is very low compared with other nations. And a lot of people want to get that up. The recent Democratic voting rights bill wants to make Election Day a national holiday and just give better voting access. So while I agree with Henry that it would require a lot more research and that would require more effort, I think that's a good thing. And if we can do other laws like having that national holiday, that could help fix some of those problems. Another problem that a lot of opponents of ranked choice voting would say is, oh, like Republicans will say this would hurt Republicans in elections. Democrats say the same thing about that it will hurt Democrats in elections. A lot of opponents do it more out of fear for their own political party. So my question for both of you is, do you think ranked choice voting would hurt either party at a disproportionate amount, and which party?
I wouldn't say so. I would say that the Republicans and Democrats, especially recently, have been very close in their elections, with it coming down to thousands, which is an incredibly small number in the overall scheme of the country. So I would say that both nations are, or not both nations, but both parties are very neck and neck, and the loss from ranked choice voting would hurt them both equally. And I think that the arisal of more third-party candidates is definitely not a bad thing if it supports the views of the people more than the two monopolies on the government currently.
Well, one prediction would be, at least in like the short term, right? Because obviously the theory is that ranked choice voting would invite more third parties to join. But in the short term, at least, the Republicans are larger. Like the Libertarian Party is a larger and closer match ideologically to the Republicans than the Green Party is to the Democrats. So you could see the Libertarians taking up 10, 20% of the Republican base permanently. Meanwhile, the Democrats have less of that risk with their close third parties.
Stole the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that because the Libertarian Party has gained a massive following, at least relative to other third parties over the last few years, and they continue to grow at a very good rate, they're going to start taking out huge amounts of the Republican Party, and that's going to disproportionately affect them, at least in the short term, as compared to the Democrat Party with the Green Party.
Yeah, now of course a proponent of ranked choice voting would say that's a good thing, that now people are better represented, and that maybe if people wanted the Libertarian Party as a whole, and now ranked choice voting allows them to get that party that they want.
I would agree with that point entirely. I would say that if there's a party that's losing support because the people don't like that party, that's exactly what ranked choice voting's for. It's to get rid of the monopolized parties that are supposed to be, it's not supposed to be choosing between worse and even worse. It's supposed to be choosing between who you think accurately describes your political views.
Yeah, 100%. Other new, or not newer, but other similar elections would be something like the French style, where rather than one single election with the ranked choice, voters go and pick a single person, and then the top two candidates, if no one got to 50%, do another election about 2 weeks later. We saw a similar thing happen with the Georgia Senate elections. It's common in a few states. What do you think of, say, the French-Georgia systems of 2 elections, everyone gets 1 vote, but if no one gets to 50%, then you have a second runoff election? What do you think of the runoff system?
I would say the runoff system actually gets into the territory of being a little complicated.
Yeah.
The ranked choice is just who do you think is your best candidate, put them first, put the next one under it. If you can't write a list of your favorite people, then I don't know if you should really be voting in an election. The French system, however, does start getting on the complicated side. It's multiple elections, it's choosing not just one candidate. If yours doesn't get in, then you've got to go back and research more. I would say that while not being terribly complicated, it's definitely worse than just a basic ranked choice system.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you there, Connor. It is too complicated. As well, it still supports the top 2 candidates, which most likely are going to be, in this country, Democrat and Republican. So it's not really giving that third-party voice that the ranked choice voting is promising.
Also, the cost of 2 elections, the highest cost Senate election in U.S. history occurred this cycle in the Georgia runoff. Not the initial Senate election, but the second runoff election. It was the most expensive in U.S. history, and like the cost of having 2 elections is another problem with that runoff system. Going back to the international issue, you also have the more common parliamentary system modeled after the UK Parliament, where rather than have 3 branches of government, you have an executive that is simply chosen by the majority party. And parties have to form coalitions with other parties in the parliament. What do you guys think of that system? Because countries like the UK with the parliamentary system do have more third parties, but they have their own issues of their own, where they have to hold, like Israel has held 4 elections in 2 years. What do you think of the parliamentary systems?
I think that system is a problem. That's the true democracy, not our republic system. True democracy, 51% of the people own 100% of the power, and that is certainly something we don't want to fall into. That's why we have the whole Senate. That's why we have the House of Representatives. It's so it can split up the Republicans and the Democrats, generally in this country, so that they can discuss ideas and eventually hopefully make a law out of it. That's why we have that vote. In the European, or in the English version, you have the 51%, whoever they happen to be, owning 100% of the power. They can pass whatever laws they want. It doesn't have to be reviewed by the other side. And that's a huge problem.
I completely agree with Henry on this point. If 1 or 2% of a population can be the deciding factor and leave not quite majority, but almost half of a population feeling underrepresented, that's awful for both sides eventually.
Yeah. Well, I think we've had a very educational and informative discussion. Not only have we discussed ranked choice voting, but we also went to runoff systems, and we also did international politics as well. I think we've learned a lot about different election systems, and thank you for joining in.
Thank you very much, Ethan.
Thank you.
And now we're going to go to Sean in the field, who's interviewing students on this topic.